Great. I hope everyone out there can hear and see me. I'm going to put my camera on real quickly to show you that we are live. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I know that we have people coming from all around the world to our webinar today. It's very important to me that we start on time, and those people who have been waiting for this webinar to start aren't then at a disadvantage because we wait for the slow pokes. So we're going to start right on time. And if those people that miss anything, they'll probably just miss me, which they haven't missed much, right? So that's just me in the beginning. So I'm Dave Gallagher. I put my webcam on just to show you that we're live, and I'm going to turn my webcam off so you don't need to look at me. So again, welcome everyone. Welcome to our first one image workflow workshop and webinar. This is going to be an hour webinar, which we want interaction. And it says, Joe, am I in the right place? Joe, you are in the right place. Hopefully you can hear me. I'd love to, if anyone doesn't know the interface here, you can ask questions on the right like Joe did. You can raise your hand if you want. I'm going to be moderating for Barry, and I'll be asking Barry the questions that you might have and try to fill them in as much as we can. If I don't get to all the questions, I apologize. We do have a full group here today. We have over 250 people that have signed up, and that is at max. So I'm not sure how many we're going to have today, but I'm not so sure we'll get to all the questions. I'll do my best. Again, my name is Dave Gallagher. I'm the owner of Capture Integration. Capture Integration, we started the company back in 2004. I've been in Atlanta, Georgia since 1991. So we're about 30 years in the industry here in Atlanta, Georgia. Excuse me. And about 16 years ago, I said, I'm done. I'm doing this for my own and going to fail or succeed on my own, and started Capture Integration 16 years ago. And knock on wood, we have done quite well, and very privileged to be in the situation we're in today and be able to be presenting to you all across the world right now. We are a family-owned business. It's a very small business, even though our presence on the web seems like we might be 20 people or so. Right now, Capture Integration has 7 employees. We have more employees for the whole corporation, but for Capture Integration, hardware, and rental, we have 7. So we're a very small family-owned business. Feel strongly that we have one of the best, if not the best, reputation in the industry. It really matters to me personally. It matters to our employees. It matters to us as a team that we strive to do the best we can every day, and making sure that we're fulfilling those needs of our customers. I started also with a partner, ShotFlow, Studio Production Management Software, about 5 years ago. So that is on its 5th year, and we're proud to say that's going very well as well. When it comes to our success, we've been Phase 1 Partner of the Year 3 times since we've begun. Again, feel very fortunate to be able to say that. My team is amazing, and they work incredibly hard, and I feel privileged again to work with them. So that is our success. What we believe in. We believe, and I strongly believe in this, that we're the digital back experts. Digital back and tech cams. When it comes to technical cameras, we sell CNR, ALPA, ARCA, Cambo, and Phase 1. I think we're the only company in the US that sells all of the technical cameras. That's what I believe in. I started my career with CNR. I started with view cameras, and I believe in the highest quality on the front end. We have strong online content. I think you can see that from our website and our connection newsletter. We do workshops around the country. We have talent that we bring in from all over around the world. Barry, that you're going to see today, we're working on our 3rd workshop with Barry. Totally believe in long-term partnerships with our clients. They are partners. We believe in the partnership level of clients, and that we are hoping that we are an added solution to their success in their business. And we deliver service that our clients are unaccustomed to. That's our goal. Do we always meet it? No, unfortunately we don't, but I would tell you that that is our goal, to deliver the service that clients are unaccustomed to anywhere else. and importantly, myself as a father, as a husband, as an employer.
Shit.
Thank you for the questions. It looks like the audio dropped. You're not here to listen to me, and so my audio is going to be switched over to Barry. And so Barry, are you ready out there?
I am ready. Can you guys see me?
All right, Barry. No, I am changing presenter over to Barry now.
Okay. Let's, all right, show my screen. Hey guys, I hope you guys can all hear me. And first, before we get started, I wanted to thank Dave and his entire very talented and dedicated team at Capture Integration, without whom this would not be happening. So I'm actually really excited to share my work, my images, and with that, let's get started. I want to look at some pictures. So give me 1 second to click over. Okay. My name is Barry Grossman, and I've been photographing interior design and architecture for about 30 years, predominantly in South Florida. But when you shoot spaces and exteriors and buildings, you kind of travel where the buildings are. One of the cool advantages of being an interior and architectural photographer is you can work for a huge range of clientele: home builders, interior designer and architects, residential design and luxury real estate market, GCs and building architects, and so resort hotel clients. So as I'm sharing my work with you, I'm hoping you guys get a sense of what's important to me as a photographer. And for me, what's most important is framing, composition, quality of light, and how you are telling your client's story. So I think strategically, when you're shooting for a residential designer, you might be focused more on details. You might be looking to accentuate and highlight their furnishings. But at the end of the day, as a photographer, it's still about composition and quality of light. And so I'm always being strategic, maybe a little bit selfish as an interior architectural photographer, because I want my signature to be on these images as much as my client's signature to be on the images. So I shoot a wide range of interiors work, and what I'm sharing with you today really spans about 12 to 15 years from my portfolio. So this isn't just recent work. I started shooting professionally in 1990 and got my first digital camera in 2003. And what kind of got it all started for me, what inspired me, was really about 8 years in film school. I've, I, that's really what drove me. It's what excited me about image making, especially these types of pictures. And these are beautiful, beautiful black and white still frames from one of my favorite films, Citizen Kane, photographed by Greg Toland, really one of my cinematography heroes. And what you're seeing in this type of work is not only beautiful set design, but beautiful lighting design, depth, a sense of theatricality. And I still to this day think about these things in my work. This is a beautiful still from the cabinet of Dr. Caligari. German Expressionism really influenced my early film work, and really to a degree how I photographed with my 4x5 view camera. Back in the day, with a lot of German Expressionism, they did a lot of hand painting of their sets. So the set design really had a lot of this light built into it, because I don't think they could sculpt light as much as you can. The units were huge, and the ISOs from these film stocks were so slow. Flash forward about 50 years to the first Blade Runner and Jordan Cronenweth. This is really speaks to me today looking at these images, and it totally spoke to me when I was in film school when this movie came out. You know, backlit, dramatic light shafts. And now you're taking a look at some of my earlier 4x5 film work, and I think you can still see some of that DNA in these images. This is all done with one exposure. However many lights I had at the time were tucked in behind those windows and doors to kind of throw and create shafts, create interest, create drama, and hopefully inspire my client. And again, when you're doing, single capture photography, this is another 4x5 frame, you had to hide your lighting units. So I have lights hidden behind everything you could hide them behind the cocktail table, behind the sofa, just off frame left, just off frame right. That's what it took to create and light an interior back in 1990 so-and-so. So my style began to transform slightly as this interior decor transformed, and certainly what you're seeing here are very heavy stone and iron, and kind of it lent itself towards more of a heavy application of how I shot and how I illuminated things. Flash forward to about 2003 when I got my first digital back, and it was the Phase 1 H20. It shot a square format, which is what this image was captured with. And again, I still hadn't gotten over that kind of hump where I was going to do multi-layered images. I'm not even so sure Photoshop had layer functions back then, but this particular image is comprised of about 18 minutes where I was able to capture those lightning strikes, and probably 10 to 12 lighting pops with a strobe, and also with a little flashlight my assistant had to hit the orchids, to backlight the wine glasses on the left. And this ends up being one frame. Now, this is a few years later, admittedly. This is photographed with my Phase 1 IQ260. This was my third Phase 1 digital back, and I'm using a technical camera here. I'm shooting this with the Cambo WRS 5000, so I'm shooting with a tech cam, but I'm still mostly capturing this entire image in one capture. So my assistant and I are wearing all black. We're walking up and down that tunnel using a Profoto B1 and just basically popping the rocks, popping the ceiling, popping the foreground to make this image essentially function as a single capture. Now, flash forward to the year 2020. This is a recent shoot that I did, and I'm now shooting with my fifth digital back, and I'm so pleased to be working with the IQ4 150. And I'm still into shafts of light, apparently, because you see them kind of running rampant throughout my portfolio. However, I'm shooting a little bit differently these days. I'm now working, for the most part, with one, maybe two strobe units. And here's a little peek behind the curtain. There's my assistant. My light stand didn't get quite high enough. And this image is comprised of probably 3 or 4 light layers similar to this one. And I'll back up one that helped me create those shafts on the wall. That's all lighting masked in within Photoshop. So the shadows are real, the highlights are real. It's all coming from the light. Here's one more example. This is actually photographed at our first workshop we hosted with Capture Integration down here in the Boca Resort. And this is a beautiful final image composed of—
Barry?
Yes?
By jumping, could you do me a favor and move the cursor over to the side?
Oh,
awesome.
Is it off to the side?
Yep, it's great. It was a little just there in the middle of the image.
Yeah. Oh golly, I didn't see that. Sorry, guys.
That's okay. It was brought up by one of the people listening. And so again, if
Thank
you
you.
guys have a question while you're listening, please go ahead and ask that question, and I'll ask Barry as we're going through this, because any questions that you might have, 10, 20 other people might have the same question as well. So please don't hesitate to ask. Sorry, Barry, go ahead. Thank you.
No, thank you, Dave, and thanks for pointing that out because I can't see the cursor on my screen. Webinar technology. So here is one of my favorite images from the Boca Resort, and it's one that we shot at the workshop. And just one little peek and how we kind of put a spotlight on the beautiful star of the picture, that gorgeous sculpture. And just for the record, this image is made up of probably 7 or 8 spotlights like this. And another one I'll just briefly show you. This is a lobby we did down here in Miami Beach. And there's Eli with the ProPhoto B1. And this final image you see, rather subtle, is comprised of 2 lighting layers and an ambient frame masked in within Photoshop. And that takes me to the workshops and the webinars. And I'll just repeat that it's been really an amazing experience working with so many photographers, thanks to Capture Integration, who've really organized and essentially produced these workshops with me as the host. And we've done several, and fingers crossed we'll have a third upcoming soon. And it's a great opportunity for people to work with me, for me to work with them. And between Capture Integration and Phase 1, we've got about 5 camera systems to play with, and everybody gets a chance to shoot. We're working in teams of maybe 2 or 3, sometimes teams of 1 or 2, and it's a great opportunity for people to shoot with the best equipment in the world, and hopefully have some pretty cool locations to shoot in. And a large component of the workshops, clearly, and we're going to get to that today, is comprised of the post-production workflow. How do I put all these images together within Capture One, and then of course outputting them into Photoshop. I personally shoot with the Cambo WRS 5000, which is a beautiful technical camera made by Cambo. I love it. I had the opportunity to play with and demo the Phase 1 XT technical camera on several occasions, and here I am kind of playing with it and shooting a hotel courtyard. It's an amazing tool. And the ability to have the camera, the lens locked in space, and for the digital back to rise and fall or go left to right for stitching, it just gives you so many creative and also technical advantages. This is another image from our Vegas workshop, and not too ironically, this is a shot in the room that I want to share with you how we lit it, how we put it all together. And this, again, is one of my favorite images in my portfolio. And consider that how much activity was going on throughout this shoot. 15 photographers scurrying throughout the house with 5 different systems running at once, inside, outside, the dining rooms to the right, the bedrooms to the left. So we were able to kind of put together a pretty clean, pretty simple image. And with that, I'm going to take you out of my slideshow and take you over to Capture One. And I really wanted to kind of show you where it all begins. And so, excuse me, this is literally the first shot from this living room twilight image. And I'm going to cycle through and show you the entire progression, how we shot it. And here I am backing the camera up, and we're working with a few of our photographers who are functioning as stylists for me. When you shoot interiors, especially residential interiors, I mean, a very important aspect to your shoot, really any shoot, is the subject matter. In this case, the subject matter are the furnishings. It's the interior architecture. So being sensitive to how I frame it, sensitive to what lens choices I select, the placement of the camera, and I'm just cycling through these pictures literally one after the next. So you can see the shot being kind of built and put together. And so for a shot like this is a pretty big space. the trap that a lot of interiors photographers can fall into, myself included, is they want to show everything in the picture. And sometimes that is advantageous. It depends who your client is. I'm finding these days that my style is really more about focus and honing in on what's most important in the frame. So you don't have to put everything in the frame. Therefore, what's in the frame needs to be purposeful, beautiful, and really tell the story that your client wants you to tell. And there is a gentleman from Capture Integration taking our picture. This is one of my favorite kind of behind the scenes shots, it turns out.
And Barry,
yes.
your cursor's in the middle again.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Sorry, I can't see the cursor. I apologize,
okay.
you guys.
Yeah, that's okay.
So you see the shot is being built, little things with the pillow, without the pillow, with an umbrella on the left, it shouldn't be there. And so the camera's still being refined, but we've pretty much committed at this point. When you're shooting a twilight or a sunset image, your instincts need to be on. So hopefully there isn't a lot of, where's the right place to put the camera? Hopefully there isn't a lot of, uncertainty. And having done this for so many years, I'm typically pretty good at knowing where I want to put the camera. And it just comes down to the small little details that make it hopefully more dramatic, more perfect, more interesting. And so we're getting closer. The light is coming down, and this may in fact be our last. Yes, it is. I'm going to go back. This is our last ambient frame. And when I shoot interiors, or exteriors for that matter, if I'm shooting a twilight image, I will shoot a succession of images over time. And usually, depending upon the time of year and where you are, the perfect image is going to be in a 15 to 20 minute window. So let's say, for the sake of this discussion, this is the perfect first one. And so I know that now that we're looking through, even though this image was taken 2.5, 3 years ago, I know I've arrived at an image. Nothing is going to move at this point. And now my assistant and I are going to start lighting. Again, considering that this is a working environment and in the sense that we had a workshop going, we could have easily done 17 layers and lighting up this interior. But the truth is, I wanted to demonstrate then, and I want to demonstrate today, how you don't need that many if you're strategic in terms of your light placement. So you notice here my shutter speed has changed dramatically. My shutter speed is really reduced, and that enables me to do a couple of things. Most importantly, it's enabling me to overpower that tungsten light, that warm light. And so I'm hitting the sofa, and I'm going to show you a couple of other images from a couple of different angles, and I know I'm hitting it with a neutral color temperature. Same thing goes here, hitting these kind of greenish mustard colored chairs a couple of different ways. And actually, in retrospect, let me mention one quick thing. I typically like to illuminate from the middle out. So I would say 9 times out of 10, this may in fact would have been the first image that I got, because it just affects how you illuminate and how you see the lighting for the rest of the shot. So that wasn't what we did here, but I just thought I would mention that this really could have been, and truthfully would have been more often than not, my first lighting layer, because it does a number of things that are beautiful. It doesn't just illuminate the chairs, it illuminates some of the stonework by the fireplace. Speaking of the fireplace, we have a couple of quick, easy pops. That umbrella probably should have been pushed in a little bit further. We don't want that light leaking out like that, but it's a couple of quick pops hitting that slate wall, again, at a faster shutter speed. That's going to give me some creative advantages in post, and we're going to talk about that. Now it looks like, I'm going to guess about 10 or 12 minutes have passed, and I decided it's time to shoot a couple more ambient frames. And if this was a daytime picture and the light hasn't changed much, we may not be continuing down this path. But because the lighting is changing outside and the relationship of exterior to interior lighting, most importantly, is changing. So the exterior is getting darker, the interior is glowing more. It's important to shoot this succession of twilight images. And so here I am doing that. And these have not been corrected, by the way, you guys. I felt it was important to leave these kind of as is for the sake of our demo today. And so let me back up one more to this.
And Barry,
So
Barry, before you go
yes.
any further, I think a really
Mhm.
important question. Are you setting your white balance? This is a question from an attendee. Are you setting your white balance for the exterior, or are you setting the balance for the tungsten interior? How are you getting your initial white balance?
Great question. First of all, let me answer it simply first. The strobe layers, let me back up, are all white balanced the same. And let's just say for the sake of argument, it's 5,000 degrees Kelvin, because that technically should be what these lighting instruments are. So all of these strobe layers are color balanced the same. That's another reason why I shoot at a faster shutter speed, because you're effectively eliminating the warm light, okay, that might be infecting. But the more difficult question to answer in this case is, what would be my white balance for an image like this? Well, you're dealing with that kind of funky incandescence on the inside. You're dealing with, twilight in the back, but you've also got twilight hitting the flooring out back. Honestly, for me, I try to find the balance that feels right to my eye for a twilight image like this, which admittedly can lean itself more toward a dramatic effect. If I was shooting more of a daylight picture, if I was shooting a more technical shot where I was shooting a commercial interior, for example, where I needed very neutral grays, I will color balance on the subject matter. In other words, the interior, uh, furniture, walls, things of that nature. So this is a tougher question to answer succinctly, only because look at what's happening on the slate wall there. So white balance is going to vary, and what one of us thinks is beautiful and right might be different than what another photographer thinks. These days, I am leaning more towards neutrality for my neutrals, but in a twilight image like this, if I lean a little bit warm, maybe 100 to 200 degrees Kelvin, I actually think that's pretty cool, and I don't mind that. So back to the lighting. I basically have covered all my bases, and everything's basically been lit already. And I'm going to go back to this image. What else should I have lit that I didn't? Well, in retrospect, and having looked at this photograph so many times over the past couple of years and a lot over the past few months, there are a few things that I could have done and frankly didn't do, but I'll call them out right now. It might have been really cool to have a big, beautiful light source way back up against the pool, firing in towards the lens, and that might have effectively backlit the ceiling. And you see that there's, I'm gonna put my cursor on the screen for a minute. This is actually a reflection of the ceiling here. So I could have backlit the ceiling and gotten some more drama here. I never did that. It might have also been cool to maybe emulate the city lights with a light, just to kind of have it, so I can play with it in post and layer it in if I felt like I wanted it. If I had a big umbrella back here with a full CTO or a half CTO, I may have picked up some warmth and reflection on this chrome. I never did get that. Again, within the workshop environment with so much going on, and I'm tending to my photographers as well, kind of going from the dining room to the bedroom, coming back, getting my pictures. I felt like I needed to be succinct. So I did, however, think, well, there is another light source here that we may want to source from, and that's the fireplace. So I decided to create a couple of fireplace lights, and this is one with a very fast shutter speed, and this is one with a full CTO with a slower shutter speed. Both applications will work in post, and I can demo how that works. These days, I'm more than likely going to be shooting at the faster shutter speed, putting the highlights on the chair, putting the highlights where I want it, and letting the background go to dark. And once we get into Photoshop, why that's important is going to become obvious. However, when you're shooting a slower shutter speed like this, you do need to be sensitive to the overall ambient color within the room. That's why I have the full CTO on, so I can still get some more warmth out of this light. So here is my assistant kind of giving us a couple of options. Now he's walking it closer to the sofa. And I believe that's gonna, well, maybe one more. I'm pretty sure that's the last one. And then I decide just to hang 1 more minute, maybe 5 more minutes. Let me see how many more I got. So you can, the gears denote images that I've processed. So that's one. This one I felt, I guess, wasn't necessary to process. Then I got a brighter one. And then I got the final one, which is a little bit moodier, a little bit darker, a little bit more twinkling outside. And that's basically the photo walkthrough, from start to finish, how we shot it, how we lit it. And I would certainly love to answer any questions and then go over to Photoshop and show you how we put all this together.
I think we've got most of the questions that we been asked if we're recording it. Yes, we are recording. The only question might be is the flash syncing. I believe you're syncing with Copal shutters, mechanical Copal shutters with a ProPhoto Air remote on the top of your 5000, correct?
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm using a ProPhoto transmitter, just as Dave described. One of the cool advantages that the Phase 1 XT has is it has these amazing digital shutters. I guess I'm old school. For the time being, I'm still working with the mechanical shutters, which are beautiful. And with the IQ4 150, you still can switch the digital back into electronic shutter mode. In fact, I photographed last night. I got some exteriors of a home, and I did all of it without the mechanical shutter active, with just the shutter open. But however, if you want to shoot with strobe, yes, you're syncing with the transmitter into the digital, excuse me, into the mechanical shutter. So here we are in Photoshop. Now, one of the things that I probably should mention is the basic workflow. I don't want to dedicate too much time for this, but essentially everything out of Capture One needs to be saved. For me, I'm saving everything out at max resolution. In this case, it's 150 megapixels. And I'm saving everything out as an uncompressed 8-bit TIFF. That's 95%, 98% of the time. Only in rare instances am I outputting in 16-bit, and that's if I know I'm blowing something up very big, or if I perceive, which truthfully I don't, any kind of banding or any kind of color improprieties that might rear an ugly head. But it's extremely rare. I mean, as long as the camera itself, and maybe Dave can speak to this, is capturing in that full 16-bit, I feel like I can output and process and do my work most of the time in 8-bit. The files get massive. And if you can see my screen down here, don't be fooled by this, because admittedly for today's webinar, I did reduce the file size slightly, just so that my computer wouldn't kind of bug out and have any problems. But normally these files are about 400 megs or over 400 megs as an 8-bit RGB file.
Barry, I've got a really good question. Not that all the questions aren't really good, I apologize for saying it that way. But how much do you do in Capture One prior to exporting? How much of the toning and work in Capture One do you do, and how much do you do in Photoshop?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll say this: it depends on the shoot. Some shoots I'm doing quite a bit of pushing and pulling, and you can see here for this ambient shot I'm doing 0 pushing and pulling. It depends on the shot. I will say this: the new version of Capture One is amazing. It was not around when we created this image, and the new version of Capture One does some incredible things with the high dynamic range. So yeah, you really can do, let me get out of his for a moment. You can push your blacks, you can pull down your whites. I mean, they really have created more in the high dynamic range, where the white and the black sliders really deal with the bottom and the top, let's say 5-7% of the histogram, whereas the highlights and the shadows are, let's say, 25%, the bottom and the top 25%. So the high dynamic range sliders have gotten so great that you can do a lot of stuff right here in Capture One. Something also that I've really fallen in love with, and I don't want to spend too much time in Capture One, but somebody asked, is the Luma range. It's essentially an advanced masking tool which lets you create a luminosity mask. It's brilliant. I did a photo shoot a couple weeks ago where I really kind of wanted to see what could I do, how far could I push it for an interior shot, an inside looking out shot. And with the Luma range, I'm able to essentially mask out a very bright highlight and then brighten up dark interior images, a portion of the image, and then they blend pretty beautifully. The Luma range is really a 10-minute exploration in and of itself, and I don't want to dive into that and not be able to
Yes.
go to Photoshop and show my light layering,
Right.
but the simple answer is I'm doing a lot of stuff in Capture One, more these days, just because Capture One's gotten so much more powerful uh, than it
But
ever used to
Barry,
be.
you are not balancing your strobe to your ambient in Capture One. You're doing the balancing in Photoshop.
Yeah, I think it's important to output all of these frames, okay, at the correct or as close to correct color temperature. So this feels moody. Is it a little warm? Yeah, but this is the feel I was going for. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say this is color correct to me. Now in
Right.
Photoshop, we can tweak it a little, and certainly in Capture One, we can tweak a little. We can desaturate these walls a little. If we felt they were too warm, we can enhance the blue. Capture One is immense and powerful, and I'm using it more and more. That said, in the workflow that I'm going to demonstrate today, it's mostly the raw stuff captured with a few tweaks as I need them, output into Photoshop. But in terms of color consistency, again, have your ambient be as close to what you think is right, and then have your strobe layers be as close to what they should be as well.
Great. We are at the halfway point, Barry. So you're right
Okay.
on target. Okay.
I'm right on target. Well, here are
All
all
right.
the images. So as I was saying, you're outputting from Capture One, you're saving out the TIFFs. At present moment, unless somebody knows something I don't, you cannot export directly into Photoshop. I hope that happens soon. So basically, once you get into Photoshop, you need to go to Scripts, load files into Stack. You then navigate to the images you want, and you open them, and whoop, they all open up here. They will all open up, by the way, however you saved them. So whatever the name is, that's how they'll open up. In this particular case, I applied the name here in Photoshop, so I called this ambient glow. You can call it whatever you want as you're going. But just to save time for today's demonstration, I basically have named all of these and kind of organized them a little bit. So here are the three ambients. You see that's the, and I can isolate this for a sec. This is really the that middle one, if you will. Let me isolate it. And then let's take a look at that early one. And then let's take a look at that late one. Okay, so I'm option clicking on the eye to solo the layers. Okay, so let's not do that anymore. Now that said, a lot of my layers, the layer blending that I do is not just normal mode. What's brilliant about Photoshop, and this really has changed my life, is you now have so many incredible, what they call blend modes. And they're all extremely powerful. Some are more subtle, some are really over the top, but they're all very effective. For my technique, most of the time I'm working in a lighten mode. But what that means is I have a dark image that I want to add light to. So if you see that is in lighten mode, if I shift click on the mask, you're gonna see there's the umbrella, and this is where it gets lighter. This is why, and let me solo this for a second. This is why you want to shoot at a faster shutter speed. Because if I shot this at a slower shutter speed and I had several color temperatures bouncing around in here, when I use my lighten mode technique, it's going to create a lot of color crossover and a lot of color casting that is going to be fixable, but it's more trouble than it's worth. So this is more than likely shot at maybe a 30th or a 60th of a second, comparatively to maybe a 4-second or an 8-second exposure. You guys get the idea. Okay, so everything has been named in that same fashion. And let's kind of take a look at how we put it together. So I usually like to work from the bottom up. I create a layer stack, and I've done a little bit of that busy work before you guys, join me today. And let's take a look at, again, I like to work from the center out. I wish I had that light back on the pool deck, but it never did happen. Let's take a look at the chair center. I'm going to shift click on it, and you can see what it's doing. It's giving me a beautiful quality of light on these chairs. It's throwing some light to the sides that maybe I want, maybe I don't. But with a simple airbrush, and there's so many ways to mask in. You can mask in with a marquee, okay, and then you can isolate it and paint within it. There's so many different ways you can do that. Oops, that didn't work. You get the idea here. But I'm just gonna use a simple airbrush. Let me make sure that I didn't do something I shouldn't have. Okay, I think I was on the wrong layer there. I'm gonna very basically make sure I have my white selected, paint in. Let's go back. I did make a goof up here, you guys. We're going to paint in that top light. And I can be rather kind of coarse with this. I'm going to zoom in a little here. Okay. Because we want to kind of make sure it's a soft top lit blend, just kind of kissing the chairs. Let me back up. Now, when you're doing this kind of stuff, you always have to be careful about exposing things that you shouldn't be exposing. So you need to be, and I'm not working on my big monitor today. I typically do all my retouching and blending in a 27-inch monitor. Today I'm doing it on a laptop for the sake of the webinar. But just really quickly, before and after, you can see how I've added a little illumination. Let's add a little bit more. And I'm being subtle. I'm not blasting it, okay? And you can see that I'm at a flow of 9%. Most of the time when I'm working at an even lower flow, which basically means the airbrush effect is happening slower. So I like to work at an opacity of 100 and a low flow that lets me, with subtlety, paint in that light. Okay, let's go back in. Now, something else, I'm going to shift click on this mask again. It's also hitting the top of the sculptures. Let's make our brush a little smaller. And you can see very carefully, again, I'm shooting in lighten mode. And because that background was dark, I can be pretty kind of loose and just paint in the highlights. Unfortunately, this light, I'm going to expose it, is going to show the light stand. But that's, you know, that's actually not so bad because I can add it and then remove it pretty painlessly. So that's a good place to start. I don't, you know, you don't feel like you need to go from 0 to 100 before you can move on to the next layer. I find myself kind of going back and forth throughout the whole process, and it makes it feel organic. That said, of course, because it's on its own layer, ultimately I can reduce the opacity, I can change color, I can change light levels or brightness, contrast on a level by level, layer by layer basis. But let's not go there quite yet. Let's look at the next layer, which is the back wall. I'm going to shift click on it and you see what it's doing. And I'll just solo it again just so everybody remembers what it looked like. There's my assistant with the umbrella. It's hitting really both walls, but I'm a little bit sensitive to kind of how the light at that position is giving me it's actually highlighting some of the flaws in the finish. So always be sensitive to that. And if your lighting is very dramatic and over the top and it ends up making your subject matter look, you know, less than flattering, then you need to curtail that, don't you? So I'm going with my brush and I'm going to paint in lighten mode. And I'm actually going to show you before and after, and it smooths out the wall. It fixes the color temperature, okay? And you can be relatively kind of, I hate to say loose, but you can be relatively loose with it. You're not worrying about hitting the outside because as you see here, I'm painting all out here and it's not affecting the sky at all. It's only affecting what the light is hitting because the shutter speed was fast enough, okay? So let's take a look at that. Let's take a look at the close part of the wall and do the same thing here. Just with some subtlety. And again, you can start off a little bit more broad and then go back and kind of curtail it and shape it. Like I can see this might have gone a little bit too far in here, so I can kind of quiet this down. And this becomes a kind of a back and forth process of painting light in to kind of achieve an overall look. Now, something else that this light is doing, if I shift click on the mask, it's also hitting that beautiful kind of granite. So let's go ahead with a small brush. And again, just you can paint it in. Now, if you want to work with a pen and a tablet where it's pressure sensitive, obviously that's advantageous. And let me take a look at this one, the back one. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to paint a little bit of that granite in. Okay, that's looking pretty cool. Let me back up and see the whole image. So right now I have the left side, I have the chairs going. I'm still not so sure the chairs aren't a little bit too bright, but for the time being, let's leave them as is. Let's take a look at our sofa now. And again, it's in lighten mode, and I'm gonna shift click on it. And because it's overpowering the light that's there, okay, I'm not really too concerned about color crossover. Basically, it's overpowering that color that's underneath it. Now, you do need to be somewhat sensitive to this, okay? You can experience color crossover if the light levels are close enough. So we'll have to deal with that if it comes. But at the moment for this, it's not a problem. I'm getting pretty neutral where I want it. A pretty neutral sofa. But that said, I don't know if I want it 100% neutral. I want a little bit of that warmth still in the picture. And the important takeaway from this kind of technique, and what I hope you take away from this, is how you can apply this to your work. And not every shot is the same. But this light painting and experimenting with blend modes is crucial for so many different types of photography. Let's take a look at this one. This is also in light mode. That's basically top lighting, and it's giving me some really nice definition on the top of the pillows. I like that very much. A little bit here as well. Let me back up. And I'm being pretty quick, as I know we're kind of somewhat limited for time today. Now I have this front one. Let's take a look at this one for a second. Now this can function a couple of different ways for me, and this actually is kind of cool. Let me show this to you. Right now I have it as a lighten layer, just like all the other lighten layers. So if I painted this in, it's really it's gonna feel like I'm blasting the sofa, which again, may not be a bad thing. I can always taper it. I can always reduce the opacity of this if I wanted to make it more subtle. Let's go down to, like, say 50%. So that's actually not a bad look, okay? But what would happen if I changed it into color mode instead? What color mode is doing is it is imbuing the color properties from this layer, okay, and let me isolate it again for us. It's putting the color properties from this layer, which is theoretically spot on, dead neutral, on top of everything that's beneath it. And I actually wouldn't necessarily use it here in this case because I'm going to be adding some warmth at the end from the firelight. But it's kind of nice to know that you can use this. So if you have a very dramatic image, let me hide this for a moment. If you have a super dramatic image and you're like, you know what, I'm not that crazy about the color temperature. How do I deal with it? You can just use this layer as a color layer. And you see all the shading, all the luminosity, which is a Photoshop term, all the luminosity is coming from that which is beneath this layer, but not the color. Okay, so for the time being, I could leave it as is. It actually, you see the difference though between color and lighten. It's just really overdone. So if I wanted to leave it on lighten for the time being, I probably would be a little bit more subtle, reduce this a little, because I still want it to feel moody. And that feels
Barry,
pretty good.
With all of these, all but one, you have no gel on the light. The only one you put a gel on the light was trying to mimic the color balance of the fireplace, correct?
Correct, because in lighten mode, and in this particular case, really the color properties are coming from the color correct light that's on the lighten mode and the ambient light that's on the ambient layer and the color that's underneath it. So they don't all have to be the same color temperature in a space like this. That said, if you're shooting in a very neutral space, then what I would more than likely do is I would blend this in luminosity mode instead. And so you're only applying the luminance values from this layer. In this particular example, since we're going for a moody kind of twilight, warm, cool vibe, you know, I think it's okay, and you can get away with working in lighten mode. If this was switched to luminosity, then, maybe I can show you that with one of the layers above, you're really just putting on the light values and the colors coming from underneath it. So that said, I hate to say this, but you can be less concerned with color temperature coming out of Capture One, as long as you know how to control your color temperature here in Photoshop. I still think it's a smart practice to know your color theory and have your colors proper when you output them from Capture One. But truthfully, these days, with these different blend modes, most specifically lighten, color, and luminosity, those three are like your magic wand, because that is what lets you add light without adding color, or add color without adding light, or combining them. If that makes sense. So let's finish this, because I want to get to some adjustment layers too, and then some questions. So here's the fun layer with the CTO on it, and you see what it's doing for our chair. And again, in lighten mode, the color, and just to go back to the color temperature, I'm being sensitive to what the color temperature is when I output the file. So this is obviously a little warm, but that's okay. I want it to kind of emulate that fire. And you need to be artistic, you need to be sensitive. You just don't want to hit the chair, you need to hit the floor a little. And having done the blending of this image several times over, there's a lot that you can do just with this basic umbrella, and it feels pretty organic to me. I mean, I'm always looking for an organic look, something that feels right, but it's clearly subjective. If we felt that highlight, for example, was too much because it's coming from that umbrella, we may have to take it out. You guys get the idea. I actually don't mind it. I think it could feel like it's coming from the fireplace. You can always taper it a little bit.
Barry, you are at 10 minutes left.
Got you. Let's take a look at these other warm lights, and the sofa is the next one. And again, it's where the placement of that light is. I know I can have a little bit of warmth pop up. I'm not sure if you're perceiving this on the webinar, but I'm getting a little bit of a warm on the sculpture. I'm getting a little bit of a warm glow across the carpet. I'm just kind of kissing the neutral. Okay. You guys get the idea there. So we're almost finished here. Let's take a look at what's happening with our ambient layers, because we're basically doing this all with this ambient early layer. If I switch to the ambient late layer, which is what that is, okay, that changes everything, doesn't it? So I'm going to end up using a combination of both of these for the final image. So just take a look at that for a minute, just to see how it differs. If I decided to kind of blend the two, it really changes the feel of everything. So this is the late ambient layer. This is the early one. Let's just blend them together like this and see what we can do, and see where it's advantageous to have that early layer. I actually think up in the ceiling, if you take a look here, it's a little bit darker up there. And if I kind of blend that in, and by the way, this is in normal mode, so it's basically overlaying, I'm able to kind of mood up the ceiling a little. I'm able to bring the exposure down a little on these hanging pendants. Same thing here. I can reduce the pendant lighting a little bit there. And so this is a way for me to sculpt my ambient layers, as opposed to just living with them how they are, okay? I actually think that's pretty cool. Let's take a look one more time. Is there anything else from this layer that we like? It's mostly up here, and it does look a lot better. Now let's take a look at this last ambient layer and see what it's doing for us. I actually think it looked cool. This is why I called it ambient glow. I'm going to use this brighter ambient layer just to pop the city a little bit and pop the pool a little bit. And you see how it's opening up the exposure value. Let me back up a little bit, of the city and of the pool. Let's take a look one more time here. I'm going to add in the ambient of this early ambient, which is this one, to make the fire just pop a little bit better. Okay, I know we have about 5 minutes left. I'm going to show you one last thing, and then I'd love to take some questions, because I didn't show you adjustment layers inside of Photoshop, and really this is the finishing touches on the image making, which are so crucial to me. Let's take a look at one real quick, and that's a hue saturation. Take a look at it. Adjustment layer. When you create any adjustment layer, it comes in and it's automatically with a transparent mask. Okay, so I have this as a hue saturation, and let's say, for example, we wanted to make our sky a little more saturated. So I'm clicking on it and dragging to the right. Let's say I wanted this to feel a little more saturated. I'm clicking on it and I'm dragging to the right. Now I'm not sure how that looks on your guys' screen. It's a little exaggerated for me, but that's okay. That's okay because A, I can reduce the opacity of it. B, I can erase portions of it because it is on a mask. So if I felt like, oh gosh, I don't want that in here. See how the blue got very, very hot here. I can erase it. But better than that, I want to show you a quick trick where you can create a very simple luminosity mask that applies to that layered mask. So you're clicking on the mask here. You're going to select by color range. And you want to select by sampled colors. And if you click on the sky, okay, and I'm going to shift click on this portion, and you can drag that. You see how it's really creating a pretty refined mask for me, okay? And I click OK, and you see that has created a mask for me. Let's do one more that's a little bit easier to see, perhaps. I'll do one more hue saturation layer, and this speaks to somebody's, hey, what should the color temperature be? Let's do one where we desaturate, and I'm clicking and dragging to the left. And I know this looks really desaturated now, but that's okay. I'm desaturating it a little bit, but you see the values that it's kind of looking towards. I don't want it to hit the greens. So if I reduce this a little bit, okay, where it's not going to be affecting the chairs that much. Hang on. I can isolate the chairs. That said, it didn't really isolate the chairs too much. So I can go in the exact same fashion. I can go to select by color range, okay? And this time I can click on the wall, okay, and have that effect just be on the wall. Does that make sense? Make sure that's not inverted. So I'm really isolating, and I can shift click here, areas of the image to neutralize. Now, obviously that's very exaggerated. I wouldn't go that far, but you see how I'm able to, with an adjustment layer, kind of control areas of the picture. This final polish is really important to me, and I tend to do most of it here inside of Photoshop. One last thing I'll share with you, and then I know we're near the end, is how I kind of do one last retouch layer, and that's Command Option Shift E, and here is where I would do my retouching. And of course, this is where I'm going to go in and take care of all the things that I don't want to see in the image. I'm not going to bore you guys with all of that, but it's not just light switches and things that I think need to be removed from the picture. It's really elements that I feel are distracting. So it feels pretty good. At this point, I would go back in and maybe take a look, did I want to reduce, that top light on the chairs? Remember, we thought maybe it's a little too much. Let me hide the retouch layer. Kind of make it feel a little bit more organic. And that's basically my workflow, you guys. You guys get the idea. From here, I would save it out, and then it would automatically be saved into either a select or an output folder, and I can go back into Capture One, do final tweaks if I needed to, final cropping, and then these days when I'm shooting with the Phase 1 IQ4, because of the file size, it gives me the opportunity to output the files in multiple file resolutions, which is really tremendous.
Well, Barry,
David,
you are perfect. You are great. You are right on time. There are a couple questions more.
Please.
How long would you schedule a shot like this? How many shots do you do in a day, and how long would you think ahead of time for a shot like this?
Okay. Let's pretend this was a real shoot. I'm going to walk through the space, and if it's a manageable home, manageable for me is about a picture an hour. So let's just say I'm getting 8 to 10 pictures a day. I'm going to walk through the space. I'm going to strategize. I'm going to figure out which shots make the most sense to be shot at a certain time of day, which shots are really time critical. Obviously, this is a time critical image. I wanted to be here so I can capture the twilight. And then I'm going to really structure my day based on what looks best when. So that answers the simple question. Each image takes about an hour to complete, sometimes less. These days, I am shooting pretty efficiently, and for smaller pictures, I can shoot pretty quickly.
Awesome. Awesome. When it comes to the umbrella, are you softening it all? Are you using a diffuser on the front at all? Or just straight?
I'm in this particular case, this is at the workshop. We're working with a medium pro photo umbrella, and actually that's not too dissimilar to how I work. I'm usually working with a white large or a white medium umbrella, and I don't really feel the need to work too soft. I am working with a combination of what I consider soft or diffused sources, which are reflected or bounced light. And the umbrella light is also somewhat soft and diffused. It's a little more specular than something that's bounced, but I didn't demonstrate it here. But I also like to just go with the open reflector for really hard backlight situations. You can really create some great highlights and drama with that. So I'm using a mixture from large to small, and I'm typically not going much softer than a white umbrella unless I'm bouncing.
Great. When it comes to depth of field, Barry, are you doing any depth of field stacking, or are you getting it and maximizing depth of field another way?
That's a great question. As a guy who started shooting 30 years ago, I guess there wasn't much focus stacking when you were shooting with a 4x5 view camera. So I was an unofficial member of the F64 club, which meant I needed to stop down severely. Well, these days, the optics are completely different. I'm typically not focus stacking. And so for a shot like this, for example, I'm shooting this with a Roden stock 32 millimeter, which is, Dave, you tell me, probably the equivalent of maybe a 24 in a DSLR world. So it's wide, but it's not really wide. It's not like a 17 would be in a full frame, or like in my other wider lens would be a 23. So with this focal length, which is kind of a comfortable wide, I'm usually shooting between an 11 and a 16, and I'm focusing on the rule of thirds, knowing where my subject matter is, where the hero of my focus should be, which is probably where the sculpture is. And even though you can't see it too much because I've rezzed it down, I'm getting ridiculous depth of field to infinity at an f11-16 split, even though I'm focusing 5 feet away. So it's not that much of a concern for me when you're shooting with medium to wide angle lenses. That said, I shoot the Phase 1 XF system as well, and I have a beautiful lens for that system, which is the 55. That's a little bit longer, and that it's a beautiful lens, fantastic for vignettes where you want shallow depth of field. However, it's notorious for not being able to deliver front to back depth of field for an interior shot, at least, where your main subject is 3 feet away and the back wall or the back view could be 20 or much further away. I don't do a lot of focus stacking in my workflow, truthfully. I've played with it. I think it's really cool. It's fun. But in my workflow, with the way I shoot and light, it would just become a big problem. Way more work than it's probably required.
Well, Barry, you are right on time. Your descriptions and your or showing us the layers and functionality answered the majority of the questions we already had. And so we tagged those questions, we discussed them, and so I think we got to pretty much all of them. For all those people that wanting to see this later or might have missed it, we're going to have this recorded. It is recorded now. We're going to have this sent to you in a link for your registration. And I have to tell you, we very much appreciate Barry, his partnership, his talent, all your time that you put into this, Barry. We appreciate it very much. We appreciate you as a client, and we appreciate all of you attendees for showing up. Please, if you could, we are going to have more of these. We will have more clients and talented photographers do the one image workflow, showing us from beginning to end of their process. So please stay tuned. But for Barry, myself, and Capture Integration, thank you very much, and thank you for attending. Take
Thank
care.
you, guys.